I probably will address at some point kind of the development of our relationship because I think all relationships at their core
Sure.
have a genesis and development and where you kind of find your sweet spot and like who this dude and who this chick.
Right. Because at first I was like,
Right.
why are you talking to me?
Right. I was the minority.
Yeah.
So, but I think happens at places where being a minority is beneficial to you. And I was like, who this other person?
Right.
Now you messing up my flow.
Right.
Like, hold on, now I'm a
That's
little bit more
funny.
expendable.
That's hilarious. Yeah. But that is funny because if you then think about how the relationship come a year, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have said or cared anything about how much you were working.
Exactly.
I've been like, knock yourself out. You're going to fall out soon, but
Right.
I'm not saying anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're live on the SLANT on Facebook. You can check YouTube real quick.
So we ready?
And we are live on Facebook.
All right, we are live. What's up? What's up? What's up? My name is Brandon Risher, and this is the debut of my show, The Slant, with Brandon Risher. Before I get to my wonderful guest, I just want to explain a little bit more about what the show is, what I would like it to be, and what I would like my audience to get out of the experience. First and foremost, I want this show to be a show where people can really listen and engage. I want the topics that we talk about for people to really go to their spouses and go to their kids and go to their coworkers and really, say, hey, Brandon was talking about microaggressions or relationships or sex or whatever, and he was given a particular angle that I've never really heard of before. And, what do you think about that? I really want this show to be a show for people to really understand that there's a different way of seeing it. There's 360 degrees to a circle, which means there's 360 angles that you can see to anything. And if you narrow yourself to one or two, you're missing all the others. So what I really want to do is to be able to expose people to just a different way of thinking. So with that being said, I would like to introduce my very first guest, my partner in crime, Miss Charysse Johnson. How you doing, Charysse?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on first is because, over the past 18 months or so, we've gone out to lunch quite a few times, and we just really talked, right? Kind of talk shop about not only starting the business together, but also about what we were seeing in our work. By the way, Charysse is a licensed professional counselor.
Yep, LPC.
And owner of Jade Integrative Health.
Yep.
So, and also the partner at the Consortium of Counseling and Wellness Center. So just give a little bit of background for everyone. But yeah, we would have these great conversations about relationships. It's like, oh, what have you learned in your experience? And we would kind of talk shop. And I remember one day we were like, man, we should get this on wax.
Absolutely.
And now we have the opportunity.
And here we are.
Are
you guys ready? I don't know if you're ready for this. We're going to be good. I feel like we should almost give disclaimers about, like, is this a professional thought or a personal thought? But it'll be a little bit of both.
Let's just go.
Yeah.
We are professionals, therefore our thoughts will be professional, but it doesn't mean that we
Accurate.
can't be entertaining and eloquent and all the things that we want to be.
Accurate.
So before we get started, Charysse, tell me a little bit more about you, how you got into the field. Tell me more about your journey, about how you became the owner of Jade Integrative
Yeah.
Health.
So, man, big start. So I feel like I've always been that girl who people would stop and talk to and tell everything that was going on. I actually used to teach school. And I remember I would have parent-teacher conferences, and a mom would come in and sit down and just start crying, even though we're supposed to be here to talk about how well her kid is doing. But I've always just had a heart for people. So knew it was a place that I would get to at some point. Relocated from the north to Charlotte in 2006. Actually worked at a church where I did a lot of pastoral counseling and working with families. And then really felt called to kind of step out of that, get back into the community, pull it all together. Went back to grad school so I could be licensed. So you've got the spiritual and the clinical at the same time. And I've loved every moment of it. So Jade was this, I guess, deep-rooted vision that I had that I didn't realize I had until someone came to me one day and was like, hey, what are you doing with all of this? So it really became, in a way, like a love child, a conglomerate of just wanting people to have an opportunity to talk about what's going on for them in an out-of-the-box method. So giving you good, clinical, professional, integrative help, but then also going, let's keep it real and let's be honest and let's come in for this 60 minutes or whatever and kind of take down your mask. So every day, I love it.
So talk a little bit more about development of our relationship. So to give a little bit of background, Charysse and I were both colleagues at a previous organization, and I think when we first met, we really didn't talk very much.
No, so in candor, I was like, I don't know if I'm feeling him. You know what I mean? Just as a person, and that's just me because I am not always as extroverted as everybody else thinks, and there was a lot to learn, lots of new faces. So no, we didn't talk. You had also been there longer, so I am very much an observer in the beginning of a situation. So I was really kind of watching and going, can I trust this dude? And then things kind of evolve from there.
So what made you feel, or what shifted where you felt that maybe you could start to trust me? Again, the development of the relationship.
Yeah, I would say over time, just watching you be consistent with everyone. So I'm a big proponent on going, who are you with this person? Who are you with that person? If I see people shift and change and become too many different people in too many different situations, then I don't feel like I can trust what they have to say. So it was the consistency of like, okay, that's really who he is, and he is that way in every conversation with everybody he talks to. And so probably after like a year, then I kind of slowly
Yes,
let that guard down.
Yeah, sure. So I know for me, I was, like, okay, she's kind of about her business. She's just kind of doing her thing. I like that because my door is usually closed too. And I'm, for those who don't know, a door closed in our field means you're in session.
Right.
A door open means you're not. So, a door closed quite a bit means you're doing some good work usually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I always kind of admired that from afar. But again, I don't know why one of us didn't take the risk a little bit earlier, but I think it was, I don't remember exactly who said, well, let's go to lunch. But I think once we did, we realized that we had way more in common than we ever thought. But, just like in any relationship, somebody has to take the risk to see, kind of where do we want this to go?
Right.
And when I was talking about, hey, I want to do my own thing, and you were just like right on board, which I was kind of surprised. And you're just like, hey, let's do it. So, and here we are today.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I think I asked you very early on that I want to kind of start with today is, what has been the evolution of your work with regards to couples or just seeing relationships with patients, and kind of where do you go with that?
Yeah, so evolution of work. So couples work, again, I feel like started really early on. I feel like even before I was a therapist, I was actually married very young, which is something that I loved and don't regret, and maybe we'll get into that or not. So always have been surrounded by different couples. I grew up in a single parent home as well. So I feel like the whole art of being a couple is always something that I've been very intentional about wanting to know more about because I didn't necessarily have a model. My mom was married for 18 years before my parents got divorced. I was only 5 or 6 at that time. So again, I just grew up with a single mom. And so my belief systems around couples and relationships was very different than when I eventually got into a relationship and got married. So always been an observer, surrounded by different people, worked with them doing pastoral counseling and couples, and then moving into clinically, and then just having people come in and having a heart for being able to go, is this repairable? Is this possible? And started to see a lot of, I guess, commonalities or similarities between the kinds of reasons or what got people into relationships in the first place. And so always something on my heart. Have lots of other ideas about things to do with couples in the future, but one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think your work as a clinician has impacted your home life and vice versa? So you said you got married young. How do you think that shaped how you viewed relationships going into your work, and then how you think your work has then now shaped your relationship?
That's hard because in a lot of ways I try honestly to separate them.
Okay.
Because I recognize that our story is very different and unique. So I want to be careful not to think, well, the way we've done things is the way that everyone should do things or is going to do things. I think it creates a lot of humanness. Been married for 21 years, together for 24. So I think the biggest way that the two of them interrelate is there's not a lot that other couples can say to some degree that I don't have some context for. It's kind of like being a parent. Who you are as a teacher when you have a child is very different than before you have a child.
Sure.
You just have different hands-on experiences. So I think it's made me more empathetic. But I definitely try not to take it home. My husband is a wonderfully staunch New Yorker and wouldn't let me take it home, even if I tried, coming home with some of that stuff. But the two definitely interweave because it's experience. And, now I'm thinking of one thing. Because of the relationship that I have, I do feel like I know what's possible. I know the beauty of a really great relationship, not a perfect relationship, but
Sure.
a really great one. So that does give me a heart for when I see people who are nowhere close to experiencing that, don't believe it's possible, or have found themselves in a relationship where they were settling and didn't really know themselves before they got into it.
So when it's really interesting that you say that. I think what you value and what you see in yourself is such a change from being married young to even 10, 15 years down the road. Like what you value may evolve, kind of the ordering of what you value evolves, and that a person has to kind of learn those differences
Yeah.
and kind of adjust in real time,
Yeah.
right? What you're going to value at 25 may be very different than what you value at 40 or
Absolutely.
45 or something like that. And being able to talk about, talk a little bit more about, people use, say, communication as a buzzword, right? I'm sure anytime you ask anybody about anything about relationships, what do you wish that you would know more of? How to communicate. How do you define that within your work, and then how do you try to help an individual or a couple work through that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, communication has to be listening and hearing. And so the big piece of communication, whether it's clinically or just being honest, is going, when someone is talking to you, are you really hearing them? Are you listening to what they're saying? And do you understand the context around it? Because a lot of times you can listen to what someone says, but if you don't know the why behind it, if you don't understand this is the reason that they do the things that they do and the way that they respond, it still doesn't make sense to you. And so then someone is immediately trying to come up with their rebuttal. So the moment you start coming up with your rebuttal in your head, you've stopped listening.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you're just ready for a debate and win. And that's definitely not communication. So we talk about that in relationships with couples. What does communication look like? How did it start? When did it change? A lot of people talk about communication has changed. I find so often that people actually don't take time to really communicate. It's very easy to talk and not communicate, to go through a day and just be speaking about what's going on and what needs to get done. And that's very different than trusting someone, being vulnerable, being honest about what you're feeling. One of the things that I just personally value in my own relationship is he's always been very real. He's been someone that I've always known where I stand, whether I've wanted to know or not.
Right.
But I appreciate that because it's been helpful. I've never had to guess. But I also see a lot of people who feel afraid to have that conversation. And so a lot of communication doesn't happen because people want to please other people, or I don't want to say anything that he might not want to hear. I want to avoid confrontation. So a lot goes unsaid until you've got a volcanic eruption about to blow.
Right. So, taking a little bit of a step back, what I try to say when I work with couples is this: I never assume that you chose your spouse for the right reasons. Right? I never do. What that does for me, it frees me to view things from a very foundational reason. A lot of times when we choose somebody, we're young. We're making one of the most important decisions that we will ever make in life, the most all-encompassing decision. This person is going to be the mother, the father of my kids. They're going to impact where I work, how much I work, where I live, do I buy a home? There's so many transformational things to come with it. And you might be 21, 22, 25 years old when you're trying to make this decision. And a lot of people aren't armed with the proper tools. It's like, they're sometimes people try to turn a love affair into a relationship, right? And a love affair is like, I like you, you like me, we want to kick it together, and that's about as far as it goes. But the relationship part is about growth. It's about respect, right? People feel that respect is kind of implicit in love, and a lot of times it is not.
Nope.
Right, there's a lot of abusive relationships where if you ask the abuser, do you love that person? They would say, absolutely, I do. But their behavior isn't respectful. Right. So first, I'm trying to get to that first. So within any context that you're trying to have any conversations as far as a couple is concerned, I'm like, well, do these people actually respect each other? Because if they don't, now you're just talking just to talk. So it's like, can it be repaired? Was it ever there to begin with? Because sometimes people are looking for something that never existed.
Or what they wanted at the time existed, but then they realize they've kind of outgrown that need. So I see a lot
Very
of
much
people
so,
who
yes.
go, hey, I married because I wanted stability. And I knew that this person would always be hardworking and have a great job, and we would be financially secure. And then they realize, oh, but I also want a companion and someone that's adventurous and someone that's passionate, and this person isn't any of these things.
Right.
But that was the immediate need, so that's what kind of thrust them into the relationship, and they don't even often have an idea of the other things that they really need.
Right, because I mean, if you look at some basic hierarchy of needs stuff, right? So this is a little clinical stuff for people here. But those basic needs of eating, drinking, and sleeping, and sex for procreation, then right above that, safety needs. And then it goes more abstract from there. What I try to say is when you successfully and consistently reach each step, it becomes a platform.
Okay, tell me what you mean.
So if I can eat, drink, if I have a healthy diet and I exercise and I sleep well, it gives me the energy to then do something else. It creates a platform for me to breathe a little easier.
Gotcha.
So, you know, same thing. If I have a nice house and I'm not house poor and I'm not car poor and I have decent income and I don't have to worry about when I go to bed at night somebody's going to rob me, it creates a platform for me to think a little clearer.
Yeah.
Right? Now, some people will get into relationships and that is their goal. Those
Accurate.
bottom two needs,
Yeah.
which are kind of more concrete. Either you have it or you don't. Relationships are more abstract, right? There's in a lot of decisions that you're making in a relationship, they're not right or wrong. They're good or bad.
Okay.
You know, did I make the right choice? You know, it's like, no, you made a good one. You made a good choice. You didn't make the right choice. I'm sure if your structure is good, you probably have several good choices. And a lot of times, a relationship is a moment in time, right? I can't
Can be, yeah.
Right. I can't date the person that I've never met that I'm going to meet 7 years from now.
Right.
I can only date who's in front of me, right? So part of that is a moment in time. So when you're trying to figure out if I just wanted somebody to protect me and now I'm protected, what did you want to do with said protection?
Correct.
What did you want to do consistently with being able to have the space to breathe easier, to say, well, I want a man who don't beat on me and don't cheat on me, you know, and
Yeah.
come home. And if there's like, okay, and if you get that, then what for you?
But I don't think most people even think about asking those questions.
Right. Until they don't receive it. And they're like, oh,
Well,
I've had safety that I've never had before. Now I have all this ability to think about myself, and now I feel empowered to do all these other things. And the man is executing. Usually it's a man in the case that an example I just gave, and he's like, I just executed what you asked for me flawlessly.
I've been what you've always
Everything that you've asked me to
wanted.
do is like, but I need more. And it's like, but I don't have more to give.
Yeah.
Or if I do you want that from me?
And I see that.
Right, because a lot of times people compromise things. They might compromise attraction for another need. Well, I want a nice guy, right? And usually when I hear that, that's a buzzword for tell me about your previous one, right? And usually the
Can't
nice
be.
guy is the pendulum swinging on the other side to, you know, maybe a guy who you thought was an asshole or something like
But
that.
at the same time, I also feel like there are moments where people, you can get into several things, focus on attraction at the expense of all of these other things.
Oh,
where
absolutely.
attraction is nice, but only going to last so long. Like when I have a lot of conversations with probably younger people, I'm not that old, but you know, that's something that I hear a lot. And I don't think there's anything wrong. I think my husband is so fine, and I love that, and that is part of why I love him. But I think that can be overshadowed at the expense of people get caught up in a picture of what they want and don't think about the little things that they value. And so if it doesn't come across the way that they want in the package that they want, they may also overlook other people who could be extremely valuable and connected and compliment them and really truly give them at their core what they want. But they also have this picture in their head of what it should look like. My daughter and I get in this all the time. She has this picture. Love you, honey. She's almost 20. And so she's talked at different times about the kind of guy, you know, that she's attracted to, you know, visually. And in a motherly, loving way, I attempt to go, focus on character. You know, learn yourself and learn what you desire that you feel like is going to grow with you, and then see what kind of package that looks like versus I'm only attracted to people who are like X, because you might run into some of the same things and can't figure out why you can't find somebody that's compatible with you as a person.
Well, I think you have to know what's compatible. And I think a lot of times people look for redundancy and not compatibility, right? So, for example, if somebody's looking for intelligence, but the way they show their intelligence is different from the person that they're with, and like, I don't think you're really smart. Because what they're really saying sometimes is, I want somebody agreeable.
Yeah.
Right? I'm smart. If you agree with my ideas, therefore I think you're smart too, right? So some people are looking for themselves. I think I'm great if I find these features or these characteristics in someone else, therefore we will be compatible.
Yeah.
Right? If you like to tell jokes and somebody don't laugh at your jokes, but they think they're funny too, you're not compatible.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really finding that out, and that's what you have to learn those things about yourself.
Preferably before you get into a relationship in many ways.
Preferably, but some you cannot know until you're in a relationship, right? Some.
Yeah.
So there, which goes into another topic that I wanted to talk about, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, which is knowledge versus learning within the context of a relationship. I think within relationships, what I've seen so often is almost like an academic model of finding out about a person. I want to know these things about you. So tell me this, tell me this, tell me this. And you're like, okay. But a relationship gives you the great opportunities, knowing a look on someone's face, you know, where they're sitting, how, you know, what's fun for them, because that evolves, you know, their tastes.
Yeah.
There's an example that I give in work where, this is a long time ago, that I was dating someone who said that they ordered the food. What's going on? You say you like this, you don't cook salmon yourself, you've never eaten the food, but every time I've taken you to restaurants, you tend to skew this way. So I say to her, maybe after about the third one, I said, well, hey, I've taken you to this restaurant that you told me was your favorite restaurant with your favorite food, and you've never eaten it. How come? She was like, I don't know, it just didn't cross my mind. I said, is it still your favorite food? And she kind of was like, I don't know. When I said, well, I've noticed that you get chicken, is, you know, and she was like, yeah, you know what, actually, I'm trying to change my diet, right? So I had to acknowledge that I'm learning something about her. If I simply focused on what she told me and not what I was observing, then I'm going to hold her to that standard, and I might get frustrated, as opposed to saying, well, you know what, I've had this opportunity to get to learn you. I can bring this up, and then we can discuss it, and now you can put that in the canon as far as what we know about each other.
And I think the challenge of that is I feel like so many people don't know themselves, so you have to do the learning, and that's a lot of what people overlook, you know, or they attempt to go, hey, I'm in a relationship with this guy and I just want to be what he wants me to be. So they aren't honest about who they are, what they like. They're saying things that aren't true because they're so desperately wanting some unmet need to be met. And then they end up being in a relationship with someone, they're like, you know, I'm not really compatible, and I'm kind of tired of being what I've always been for you, because it's exhausting and it doesn't come naturally, you know? So that's tough.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the things that you see in your work, like some of the themes that you see when you're working with couples or even individuals who, because I always say this, whether I'm working with an individual or a couple, the other spouse is in the room.
Yeah.
Right? They may not, they either physically or, you know, or just kind of theoretically, they're in the room. So what are some common themes that you see as far as that come up in relationships?
Yeah, I feel like a common theme. So I'll take relationships of maybe people who want to be in relationships first before I go into couples.
Sure.
Is they want one thing and show something else. So they want someone that they feel like they can settle down with and spend great time with, and is laid back and enjoys hiking, and they go to the bar every week and go to the club and drink because they're anxious, and so they do things that are very opposite and attract something completely different than what they actually want, because they fear that who they are isn't enough, and so this is what I have to be in order to get something, and then kind of find them in this cycle of disappointment. I see that a lot, or where people tolerate people not being willing to learn them or know them. I feel like a lot of early relationships move so fast. They don't know each other well before they've jumped to these big conclusions. People will come in and go, well, we've been together for 2 months. I need to know where we're going. And I'm like, 8 weeks? Like, it's 8 weeks.
Right.
Like, where are you going in 8 weeks? Like, other than maybe another date. But there's something now, there seems to be, about this pressure to have everything defined and to know quickly, or people move on fast. When it comes to couples, communication is big, and then trust. I see a lot of couples who bring generational trauma into their marriage and don't recognize it. So that can be their own issues, maybe from a prior marriage or from a prior relationship. It can be potentially things that they've heard from other family members about relationships, that even though they're in a semi-healthy relationship, that's always in the back of their mind. Well, I always need to be ready. I never need to have 2 feet all the way in? What if he's not this? They're questioning that doubt depending upon what they're around. So I don't think people are really fully aware of who they are, what they've been through, and how that's impacting and influencing their relationship, whether it's I chose this person and didn't realize this wasn't really what I wanted, or I chose this person and I'm here and I don't really trust them with myself.
You know, it's interesting. 'Cause so, talking about the intergenerational stuff, one of the things that I heard a couple of patients say that I hadn't even never really heard of before until recently was both their mothers and their grandmothers said to a woman, "Find a man who loves you more than you love them." I had never heard that before, and I was like, "What in the hell is that?" First of all, how do you quantify that? Number one, it's like, yeah, I'm at an 80, and and you're at a 95, so therefore. But I think some people subscribe to that because you have the respect and deference to your parents. So you're like, yeah, so I need a man who's going to fawn over me. He's not fawning over me. He does all of these kind of requisite things I'm looking for, but I don't know if he loves me the way, or he loves me more. He expresses the love. And I think that's one of those myths. I was like, I don't know how you got to that. But, and I said, and I think she might have been around 40. I said, have you ever found a man who loves you more than you love them? And she said, no. I said, well, maybe it doesn't exist in the way that you're framing it, but help me understand what that means. So talking about some of that intergenerational stuff, it could be that. And I think there's a lot of cultural and racial and socioeconomic factors that also play into that.
That's an interesting philosophy that I have never heard.
I hadn't heard until recently.
Because that would also constantly change, right? Depending upon where I am, what I might need for you to show me love is going to look different.
Right.
So that's like giving somebody a test that they don't know that they're taking and they've never been taught. Right.
And there's one answer and an infinite amount of wrong ones, and no one knows what and even the test giver doesn't know. It's a double blind study. Both people don't know exactly what it is, but it's like, I'll know it. So going back to context that you were talking about, when you're talking about communication, if you don't have any context to what you're talking about, it's all feelings.
Correct.
All feelings. And feelings are fickle, right?
But feelings are also what I feel like this current generation of people want to go by. I don't feel something. I'm not sexually attracted to this person, so you have this guy over here who's nice and treats you kind and is respectful and wants to learn you, but you don't have a feeling when you're with him. So that's hard because we're kind of in a hedonistic place where that's what people want and don't realize that that doesn't always stay the same in every moment. It's not a constant.
Correct. So you said that more eloquently than I. I say fickle. That they kind of vacillate back and forth. And somebody can do all of these things you want them to do, and you still may not feel it in the moment. And if you don't have context to it, you're like, I just don't feel it anymore, and I'm done, versus, maybe it's something about me today. Maybe I'm having a bad week. Maybe, we're in a bad stretch. Maybe I have something that I haven't communicated to him at work. Or, hell, I hadn't slept well in 2 weeks or whatever. So it doesn't matter what you do. I'm just always in a kind of in a pissy mood. So it's all, and I think that's where the communication really comes in. Is what are your foundations? What are your pillars that you're really looking for that's going to not just keep you as you are, but to strengthen you, right? Growth. And the difference between safety and security. I talk about that in couples all the time. Somebody wants somebody to keep them safe, right? Like I remember even as a kid, like, oh, you're skinny. How are you going to protect me? And I'm like, who the hell are you fighting? Why do I need to be in a position where I need to physically defend you? I can protect you in so many other ways. I can put you in an environment where you don't have to be, as scared. There's a lot of ways of thinking about that, but people have these pillars that they're looking for without having any context to, if I receive these things, what is that going to do? What am I wanting to do that I feel that either something I can't provide myself or that this person can provide me that allows me to be something that is different than what I am as an individual? And I think another thing that younger people do is they fill their time with so many activities that when they do find someone, they have all these other activities that they're doing. And it's like, well, you just got to be a part of this. And it's like, but if I have the same thing, then it's incompatible. Versus like, nah, just go sit down.
No, I was going to say, and going back to something that you said a moment ago, a lot of people go into relationships and I want to complete them. I'm missing X, Y, and Z, and this person has it. I'm a firm believer that in a healthy relationship, you're coming in whole. not perfect, but you're coming in whole. I am a whole person, you are a whole person, and together we complement each other, we help each other grow, we learn, we develop, but I'm not necessarily looking for you to do for me what I can't do for myself. So that's often a constant conversation, is you're expecting this person in your life to do something for you that you're not doing for yourself. So you don't love yourself, but you expect them to love you enough for them and for you, and that's unrealistic. And they're not designed to do that in your life anyway.
No, they were never supposed to be
Yeah.
that. And that's where a codependency can occur.
Yeah.
Right. So you have the codependency as an extreme. You have independence within a relationship, which is also an extreme.
Yeah.
And then you have interdependence, where that codependency, you're both pillars, but you're leaning on each other. So if one moves, and the other one falls.
Right.
Right. So I think that's, you complete me, right? I think if you speak to people who are borderline, they're always looking for somebody to be that thing that completes them, right? And they always get disappointed because they put so much pressure on that person to be something that they shouldn't have been in the first place. And, borderlines are really good at finding people who will try.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they'll get fed up and then see like you're just like everybody else. And, and
Cycle.
you have that, right? Independence is without the dependency on another person. Well, yes, there are going to be aspects of a relationship where, yes, you need to show some level of independence. But you can't be in a relationship and totally independent, because then it's not a relationship. Right?
Yeah.
Now you just have a partner, or you have somebody that says, well, you know what, I can't make as much bread as I would like, so let me get this partner.
We're good roommates.
Right. And then the child becomes the house. The child becomes a business that you start together, where it's something that brings you together that without it you wouldn't have, because you don't really have any interdependence. It's like, no, I'm pretty good as I am, whole, right?
Yeah.
Not perfect, but whole.
Right.
You're pretty good as you are, not perfect, but whole. We enhance each other. We
Right.
bring something out of each other that we cannot get by ourselves,
Correct.
right? I'm pretty good on my own, but when I have a person who's beside me,
Yeah.
I'm even better.
Right.
And I think that's what people kind of need to start to think about. Like, all right, if I'm looking for somebody to simply make me whole, and they put all that energy to do that, now I'm whole. And then you have, I have so many couples where they both had a job and one became an entrepreneur,
Okay.
right? They needed the spouse's stability so then they could take these strategic risks. Now their mindset changes. Now they're growing, they're meeting all these new people, they're doing all these things. And they're like,
They don't need that anymore.
They don't need that anymore,
Yeah.
right? They needed something, but they can't say that. They can't say, hey, what I really needed you to do was to enhance me. Because that sounds transactional. It sounds like you're being used or you're using someone. But a lot of times that's what you see. So it's being able to talk about that with other people who are entrepreneurs, and they're like, yo, man, it's you and I. We're going to do this together. You may not necessarily be actively in the business,
Right.
but your love and your support can help me be something that I can. And I'm not just using you, for insurance purposes, which I hear
Right.
sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I need you to stay at your job because,
Yeah.
we need to make insurance, but we will make this pop sooner or later. Just stay with me. So what are some other things that you see as far as things are concerned?
Yeah, so big theme is people either being or marrying someone else for their potential. Never marry somebody for their potential. No matter what, you cannot change them. So
And why
constant
is that?
conversation.
Why is that?
Because at the end of the day, no one is going to change for you. Any change that we do, first of all, 85% of people that want to make a change don't, because it's just that difficult to move away from your mindset. But at the end of the day, people only change because they intrinsically, consistently believe that it's something that they want to do for themselves. When you marry or you connect with someone for potential, you're usually also overlooking reality. It's, I want this to work so bad that I need this to be what I want it to be. I
Right.
find that a lot with younger people who are like between 26 and 28, which has become that new marker of, oh my gosh, if I'm not married by 28, I'm going to be by myself for the rest of my life. And so they'll get there and they'll get desperate, and they are in these relationships with people that aren't treating them well, that don't care anything about their needs, and they overlook it because they go, well, sometimes this person is really nice and they take me out. But potential gets old. It gets really, really old.
You can't be a stem cell forever.
Correct. Or I see women who are what I like to call moms in the relationship. And so that starts off well until you get kids. And then you want a husband and realize you have another child. And then that's not so much fun anymore when you're like, okay, now we have 2 or 3 kids and I need you to be husband. And they're like, wait, that wasn't part of the deal. You've always taken care of me. And why has that changed? But I see that a lot. I haven't specifically seen it as much in males, but in females who I want to do everything. And yes, it's wonderful to do a lot of things for your spouse and to love them and do those small things. But it's very different than mothering them. And then I find that later on down the line, those women get tired of that and they become resentful. But A, you allowed it, and B, you created it. You allowed that to maintain, and so then that's a hard shift for the other person to make 10, 15 years later if it lasts that long.
You know, analogy that I use for that is at times, so like think about like I'm a customer, right? And I'm asking someone to say, I see somebody who's a chef who cooks steak very well, right? And I say, hey, I want you to be my chef, but I'm pescatarian. Right? I don't eat beef, I don't do that. And they're like, but I cook meat. And it's like, but can't you learn how to cook? And right, you're trying to make them something that they should not be, versus saying, I mean, you're nice and all, but damn, I wish you would have cooked the food I want.
Right.
My diet supports or suggests that I need this particular person.
But you knew that.
Right. So as good as you are, you're really not what I need at this particular time. And I can't make them, because if they're like, but I've done very well cooking steak, why would you want me to change? Well, because I like you. That's why you should change. Aren't I great enough for you to want to change? And I think that happens all the time. Or you have the fixer. You know, someone who's like, my job is to get you, you know, like you're a lemon, or you're what I call an open box special, which is you might be great, but with my love and care, I'll, you know, polish you up a little bit and you'll be great.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that I say is, as you said, is an absolute, is date somebody when they are confident. When someone is not confident, and with your love and care to make them whole, once you see their confidence, you will see who they really are. Right? So, yes, not saying that you need to say somebody, it was like, are you depressed?
Yeah, I'm taking
But
context.
going back to that potential, people tend not to be that confident when there's still potential.
Yeah.
But when they have actualized that potential, you know, like somebody goes to grad school and they, you know, like, oh, you know, now I have all this money now, or I have all this prestige, and you're like, you need to see them with that too. Sometimes, depending on when you get married and what the relationship is, you can kind of work through that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you want to see people when they're confident.
No, I'm understanding what you're saying, because it's making me think of when people also connect with someone through brokenness. So I'm broken and you're broken. So again, back to that codependency, that attachment. In this moment, we are absolutely everything each other needs until we heal. And then we realize once we heal and we don't have the same need from each other, there may be a whole host of areas where we are non-compatible. So
Right.
I often see like-minded brokenness connect, and then one person usually heals and goes, well, I don't need this person for this anymore. And then that's often that concept of I've outgrown them.
Right.
And so then they want to move on and be with someone else that's not broken or hurting in a way that they don't want to deal with anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, for that, I'm thinking of like two people who are depressed. Well, I understand what they're going through. And it's like, well, what happens when they're not?
Yeah.
You know, when they're happy and you're still depressed. That doesn't mean that because they get out of it, you will. And now you're like, well, what? Hold on, aren't you? Why are you going out and having a good time? Or I thought we supposed to, like, you know, kind of be that codependent in the misery. And you're like, nah, I'm not that way anymore. Thank you. Actually, you've helped me get out of this. And they're like, well, hold on, where's my value?
Yeah.
Right? That situational value more as a global value. And I think getting to learn yourself and know yourself. So let me ask you personally, in your relationships, what did you value when you first got married that maybe you don't value as much anymore? And what is something that you didn't value earlier that you very much value now?
Ooh, tough question. Okay, so something that I didn't value as much.
Right. It could have been a value, but it's like, on the hierarchy, it's not.
So I'll say this. When I first got married, or before I got married, I went into college and was like, not getting married, not having kids until after I have my master's degree. I had this trajectory, you know, in my mind. Then met my spouse and that changed. I didn't give forethought to what he would be like as a father. Not that I didn't know him well enough to know, like, okay, he's a solid guy, but that wasn't like this big, huge value of, can I see him as the father of my child?
Right.
However, down the road, being a parent of an 18-year-old next week and then eventually a 20-year-old, man, that is one of our deepest values that we are central on, and that I have loved and appreciated and been in awe of so much because of how we've grown up. So that wasn't something, you know what I mean, that I thought about. The other one was something that I have valued and I still value.
Still, or maybe it's so something that you maybe value very highly when
Yeah.
you were younger, and then it's not as big of a deal now, maybe because of where you all are
Ooh,
in
not
your
as
life.
big of a deal. I'm pretty values driven. I don't know what I have that I don't think is important because
Okay, so I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I was younger, I very much valued intelligence.
Okay.
Like being smart specifically was
Mhm.
very much a value for me. Like it probably was top two.
okay,
And it sounds like something that should be. It's not as high as being thoughtful, right?
accurate.
I value thoughtfulness way more
Yeah.
than I ever did when I was younger.
Mhm.
Because, when I was younger, I was in academia.
Mhm.
So being smart was the thing to be.
Mhm.
It was your lifeblood. It got you good grades, that was going to translate into money. And I think kind of globally, I put that on others too.
Yeah,
And people can be really smart and not thoughtful,
absolutely.
right? So when I noticed that, you know what? I mean, even in our line of work, I don't think being smart is great, but you need to be thoughtful more than anything. And I think that as I gotten older, I realized, and when I saw people who were thoughtful and I saw the benefits of being thoughtful, I valued it more
Yeah.
than I did before.
Okay, so I would say then, thinking of, not along that lines, but good example, romanticism and what it looks like.
Okay.
So growing up, I think our ideas of romanticism are very based on what we see. Whether it's a television show or, oh my goodness, I just watched this and this person went all out in pomp and circumstance, and initially thought growing into young adulthood that would be something that I would just want so much. And it doesn't mean that much to me. What I find romantic is much more small. It is in those quiet moments of him knowing exactly what to say, or the right thing to encourage, or the right moment to allow me to be whatever layer of who I need to be in that moment. So the things that I find romantic are so different. They're not superficial. Holidays are great. Birthdays and different things are fine, but I wouldn't want to give up all of these little moments that I get with this person all the time just for them to show me on Valentine's Day and our anniversary this big ordeal to be able to post. So it's in the small daily moments to me that I think carry so much more weight than I expected, because again, we're kind of taught it's these big, will they pick me up in this kind of car and take me to fancy restaurants, and that doesn't mean anything. I know a lot of people who are married and wealthy and have a great home and vacation, and go all over the country and hate each other
Right.
and do not enjoy being together, and don't talk to each other, aren't vulnerable with each other, don't enjoy being in the same house, aren't intimate on any level. So I wouldn't trade those external markers that we are taught for the
That more people would see that. But why don't you think that people are able to see that?
well, we're not growing up in the same kind of family structures as we used to.
Okay.
So I don't believe that in many ways we have a model. Like if we look historically, 50, 60 years ago, not that they were all great, but more people grew up in the confines of family. So a lot of what you think is within the context of what's around you.
Sure.
So if I'm being raised by a single person or my grandmother or whatever the case may be, my picture of things is all over the place and looks very different. So you don't come in with a lot of expectations, or those expectations are too small, until you've been with someone and you've learned them, and you have to learn yourself. Like, to me, that's the biggest kept secret of a healthy relationship, is to know yourself first.
And to continue to give yourself the space to learn.
Yeah.
Right? That the things that you, again, may have liked or loved or very much value will evolve over time.
Correct.
If you feel they can't, they won't.
Yeah.
Even when, and then you're having this inner struggle of like, why does this not really get to me? Because you're not allowing yourself the space to say, you know what, maybe this has changed.
Yeah.
As in any relationship, because I've evolved. So I cannot hold myself to the same standard. So yes, why am I asking this dude or this woman to act as if we just met in this year 10?
Yeah.
Like we should, but I know so much more about you. So like you said, the little things. It's like, I got you your favorite candy. I know you're going to have a bad day today versus, something like that. And I see that so often as well. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about dating specific to the African American community and marriages, and what are you seeing? So I want to start off asking this question.
Okay.
How do you feel that the term independent black woman has influenced relationships within the black community?
I mean, I definitely don't think it has a great connotation. I think when people hear the term independent black woman, they immediately equate it to someone that's loud, not loving, not caring, not thoughtful, too independent. And they don't often see beyond. That's a picture that we haven't necessarily wanted to paint ourselves. That's a picture that's been placed on us. If we can trace that back to slavery, of having to be this strong, independent structure.
Sure.
And it still continues and gets put in a box. And so I think people don't often see beyond that exterior. I also do feel like there's a lot of African American independent women who then also struggle between, do I want a power couple? And am I looking for somebody that I feel like matches me in all of these areas? Or can I really be okay with someone who maybe I'm a professional and maybe they're a blue collar worker, but we agree on all the right places? And is that okay even within the community? So I think it's evolving a lot. It creates a lot of expectations that I don't know is always true, for what different black women actually want and need, but more so based on this is what they think they should have, because there may be a really tough exterior that still exists, so they push things back.
So I'll look at it from a different view, obviously, as a man.
Of course.
Right? So, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I've seen that both personally and professionally. But what I heard when you were talking is investment, in that a lot of people, both men and women, particularly black men and women who have some means, they've invested in a lot of themselves. When it comes to relationship, there's also a level of investment on certain ends, right? The way money is viewed is a lot of times based on gender. Yet the traditionally what women were making 2 or 3 generations ago are not what they're making now. They're making more commensurate, or in some cases more than, but still are seeing their money in that old way. So the investment is different. So for example, he's like, well, I can go take my girls and I go to the Palm once a week and I go blow $150. So I want you to go take me to the Palm. And it's like, yeah, but I got out 150. So I have to be able to afford that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're still wanting to be treated traditionally, yet you make money commensurate that is something that is non-traditional, then there's sometimes a confluence. And how that can potentially manifest itself is that some men may just like pull out too early, and they're just like, I literally cannot afford for you to be ambivalent. So now, and that could manifest itself in saying, well, man, he just wanted to have sex with me like day 1 or day 2 or week 2 or week 3. And unfortunately, sometimes it's as simple and cynical as, well, I'm trying to get a return on my investment. I just spent $1,000 on you over the past 2 months. And you're like, I'm unsure. Now, they would say, well, traditionally, that's what men are supposed to do. And I'm like, yes, but also traditionally, women didn't necessarily have the means to be able to be more, equal when it came to pay.
So in some ways what you're saying is there was a time where you didn't have to do as much.
As a man?
Yeah, as a man, in order to treat a woman at a certain level, you didn't have,
I'm not saying that necessarily, because the money that a man spends is relatively constant.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, it is who the women are when they are taking these men out.
Right.
Traditionally, women did not necessarily, like, the wage gap was so vast that if you wanted to do anything nice, that more often than not, the man was just going to have to pay because it was just economics.
Yeah.
But now the economics are different. And I am very happy, as who has a mother and a sister, I am very happy that that is the case. But also, I think there also has to be a shift in how money and investment is viewed within a couple. Like, if you want to be a power couple, then what does that look like, right? Going to investment. What am I willing to invest to ensure this thing that we've agreed upon is going to be so? If I want to be treated more traditionally, what am I willing to invest to ensure that those conditions remain on both sides?
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the conversations that have to be had. That, you know, men see money and say, oh, if I make $300,000 a year, I can date anybody.
Yeah.
Right? That my money gives me freedom of choice. In a lot of cases, what I see with women is that it restricts their choice because they're like, I want a peer. Same money, right?
Yeah.
But it's how it's viewed.
I think it depends on the woman, because a couple of things come up for me, like when you think through that. I think you're really seeing the character of the woman that you're dating.
Absolutely.
So if you're with someone and every time you're with them, the expectation is for it to be France, what does that say about that person, and why is that person in your life, and is that really what you want? So you also get into men who take women out like that because they feel like this makes me look good.
Mm-hmm.
I like having someone on my shoulder who looks a certain way and we can go with certain things. So both of you are pumping yourselves up, and again, may totally be overstepping, but are we compatible on anything beyond this? Because if it's someone who really just wants to be with you and wants to learn you, it doesn't matter, in my opinion, where we go. Now, I don't want to go to McDonald's and Wendy's like every time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I think those are the pieces that people overlook. What is this really saying that it's been 2 months and I've spent $1,000? This is a transaction,
Right.
not a relationship. So
Right.
I think all of that is a part of the affluency that we have that also overrides our ability to go, but what else do I really want to see? Because money can come and money can also go.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, you also want to know, if we never had this, what do we have left?
Right.
Where are we if this is not what we can do?
No, and I agree, but I'm thinking that I'm looking, and if you want that, that's fine. But there's a trade-off to it usually.
But I do hear that.
But usually in society, the more money somebody makes, the older they tend to be.
Yeah.
Right? So then there may be an age gap difference or whatever that may be. So there's always trade-offs that are there. What I'm also saying, though, is if you're saying, well, I want to be this to someone, right? If someone is, you know, let's say someone is handier than I am, right? And I'm like, all right, but I can do this. And, you know, the symbiosis is you handle this and I handle this, and we both gain something from it.
Right.
As opposed to someone totally give. Now, the money, it is both indicative of a transaction, but it is also indicative of what somebody is looking for. Because what I know, I've heard this from a lot of men who are patients and even some of my friends, which is, well, I don't care how much money you make. And you're like, okay, versus the knowledge versus the learning thing. But that's interesting, though, because every time I have you choose someplace to go, you know I have to make at least X to be able to reasonably afford this and have a lifestyle. So,
And I don't know that I believe that anybody really means that statement.
oh, of course they don't. But it sounds good.
Yeah, sounds
right?
good,
But I'm saying, but men more traditionally are like, that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, or, well, you wouldn't have to do that when we're in a relationship. And you're like, but this is date 2. We're not in a relationship yet.
Yeah.
Like, what is the investment that is there? And I think that's something that always has to be communicated, and not just within the context of a relationship, but also talking to your friends. And as we were talking before off air, who do you have in your corner who's going to call you out?
Right.
Right? Who are your board of directors, or, you know,
Yeah.
you know, who's going to say, hey, you know, here's some things that you need to talk about. So speaking of which, do you try to encourage that for your patients or people that you see to say, well, who do you have in your life other than yourself? Because a lot of times that's what we are
Sure.
to people. Who do you have in your life that you trust and respect enough who can say, baby girl, hey, man, dang.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
so how much do you try to, you know, encourage people to find those people in their life?
Constantly, because it's important to always have, what I like to say, different software around you. You know, so by nature, we surround ourselves with people that degrees in a circle, and me and all my aces are on those 2 degrees, then we are missing the other 358 degrees of things.
Right.
And so I'm constantly, yes, encouraging people to go, not even just variety of people, but variety of experiences, variety of perspectives, variety of culture. Because all of that can take what we think we want and put it into a different perspective. When you've gone through a difficult moment in life, when you've gone through a difficult relationship, that changes what you value in
Absolutely.
a relationship. You start one way.
If you've learned.
If you've learned.
If you've learned from
If you've
it.
learned, or it's been close enough to you that it's touched you in some way, then it alters, like, okay, this is the pattern. I keep running into people who are doing this to me. I'm the common denominator. What am I looking for, and how am I looking for it in the wrong situation? You know, going back to what you're saying for a moment, I think the bigger piece around the independent women of any color going, can they match this, is when I have that conversation with people in session, it is more so of going, they want to know that someone is willing to come to the table with as much as they are. It ends up showing up in money, but it's just the bigger core of, can this person enhance my life? Can they do more for me than I can do for myself in any way? And if not, then why do I want to be with them? But I think it ends up manifesting itself outwardly depending upon the context of the relationship. But I think the message is bigger.
And I think you have to really understand like how vast what you're looking for really is, because if it is reduced to just money, then yes, you will look for that, and that will be of utmost importance to you. But there will always be a cost, because like you said, money can come and money can go, and usually the more money you make, the more volatile the industry may be.
Yeah.
Right. So there's also some of that as well, but people are looking at a moment in time and saying, well, this is what I want. If he can match this forevermore, then we'll be fine, versus, well, if I have enough, what can you provide me that money cannot provide that enhances me? Maybe I sleep better because of you. Your encouragement that you give me gives me an extra level of confidence to go do my thing, right? Which is so valuable. Like, I was talking to a patient, a couple, and one guy said this. He said, you know what? I'm so successful that I don't need you to do the big stuff for me, right? So going back to what you were saying earlier, what he was saying is, I need you to do the small stuff, those little thoughtful things, that are of the utmost importance to me, are just as valuable as the big things that I might provide to you. Equally, those things are valuable to me. And she still wanted to provide the big too. Well, I don't feel that I'm financially in your place. And he was like, you probably never will be. That's no shade. It's just, you're just not. But what you can provide for me that I can't give myself is so valuable to me. That is equivalent to anything that I can do for you. Any Paris trip that I can give you is equivalent to when I'm there. You might rub my back, when I have a stomach ache or something like that, because I want you uniquely to do that for me. And I think people have to understand what their value is, and it's incumbent on each person to consistently and constantly talk about how they value and appreciate that person.
How they receive love. I think the challenge there is, and of course no disclosure, but I'm curious, was she thoughtful from the beginning? Because again, that sounds like for him, maybe that wasn't something that he realized that he valued. People who are thoughtful show that pretty quickly.
Right.
So can she be that without feeling inferior to him because she can't give him what she thinks is enough, even though he's asking for something different?
Well, I think that's the realization that he is finding.
Yeah.
Right. That maybe she never did, but these other things that I very much valued at the beginning, started to erode or regress to the mean.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of times in relationships, what we want may be an outlier, and then it regresses to the mean, and you're like, oh yeah, I really didn't need that as much as I thought. I just needed it at the beginning, particularly when, like loneliness is an outlier. Right. And then it's like, what happens when you're not lonely anymore? You tend to regress to the mean, and all those other higher level values kind of go back up to the forefront. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I didn't
know, and this person can't give me any of that.
Right. And again, just like the guy who says, I don't beat on you, I don't cheat on you. He's like, but I'm just doing what I've always done.
Yeah.
And that's and again, that's the end of the love affair.
Yes, it is.
So as we kind of wrap up here today, are there any last words, anything you want the public to know about
last
you,
words.
about relationships, about anything else?
I just think pace yourself. That's another just big theme that comes up again when people are entering relationships is when someone shows you something the first time, believe them. So oftentimes we see these things that we're, kind of twinging and going, oh, I don't really know what I think about that, and we overlook it. So know yourself well, and know yourself well enough not to put up with anything beneath what you actually deserve. Don't be so afraid that you're going to be alone that you settle for anything.
I would say invest in yourself for the purposes of what you really value. So if you want a relationship, invest in the things that are going to create the conditions, not just to have one, but to have a good one.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can have a job, but not a good one.
You can have a relationship
and not a good one. So thinking about uniquely, what are you looking for to have a good, sustaining, evolving relationship?
Yeah.
Because any good relationship is going to have to evolve.
Absolutely.
Right? So understand that. And some of this is a projection, but it is a projection based on what you have seen, to your point. So when you see someone, project that out. Can this person, am I asking for this person to fundamentally change who and what they are based on what I've seen? Or do I think this is something that can evolve over time? And constantly check in with each other.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I would say, constantly checking with each other. How are we doing? That I say this, that you're lab partners and you get to experiment with each other. But you have to have something you're trying to obtain.
Right.
So always have that and say, what is our goal? What is our, what are the things that we're really wanting to do in life, and how can we adjust accordingly? One thing that I would always say, that I say in my relationships, is observe and adjust. Observe and adjust. If you're constantly holding someone to some standard that may be antiquated, then some discord and eventually some distance is going to occur.
Absolutely.
So, Charysse, I would like to thank you for
Absolutely.
being here
Thank
for the
you.
inaugural show. This is The Slant with Brandon Risher. So we're just going to give a little bit of an update of some upcoming shows. So, excuse me, first show stuff here. As you see here, on Wednesday, there'll be Unapologetically Black after the elections. On Friday, they'll be introducing the Tiki Factor and politics in Gaston County. Friday at 9. So check those out. Square Media Network. Thank you, Steve, for everything. This will be the first of many. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope that you were able to enjoy the slants that Charysse and I gave today. So, signing off. See you all later. See you next time.